Here with our G85 panel, 30-year anniversary of Godzilla 85, though technically even the 85 film wasn't quite the 30th anniversary, of course, of the American release of Godzilla, the original, but anyways, we'll ride that 30-year anniversary. My name is Nick Adam Poling. I'm actually the host of The Monster Report, a YouTube channel celebrating film history, especially monsters of all kinds, from Toho to Daiei to Universal. So check out my show on YouTube. Just type in Nick Adam Poling or The Monster Report. You'll find it. I have with me on this panel Chris Cupers, and he's going to talk about himself a little bit more. He's Goji Fan 93 on YouTube. On this panel, and we have Mr. Ed Gottschalski, and I'll actually let him talk a little about himself, but just a little about yourself and kind of your background, and then we'll start in with our first portion of the panel.
Well, I'm editor and publisher of Japanese Giants magazine, and I've done a few DVD commentaries, and I'm also producer of the documentary film Bringing Godzilla Down to Size, which was put out by Classic Media a few years ago.
And I strongly recommend that if you've had the chance to see the Classic Media DVDs that are out there of a lot of the Godzilla films, Ed's voice is on those commentaries, as well as Battle in Outer Space, Mothra, the Destroy All Monsters. If you can find that rare one that's out there, that still has.
Unfortunately, it's not out there.
Well, it's
being Violante.
Violante is not out there at all, is it?
Yeah, I did a commentary for Violante, but the company couldn't get permission or get the clearance to put it on the disc before the disc was published, so unfortunately, although the company paid me for it, it's never been actually heard.
Right. And Ed and Steve Reifel are actually working and have completed their work on an upcoming new book.
Biography of director Ishiro Honda, which I hope will be in store.
Next year we should expect that, and we're going to hope and pray for that. So in the case of Godzilla 1985 or overseas is 84, we're going to talk about both films. So if you felt like talking more about one or the other, at the end we're going to have the chance to do some Q&A. But as far as the film goes, it has quite a great history that hasn't really had the chance to be told as much. I mean, yes, you can do the research, you can read the books, but what's great about having Ed here is he's actually had the chance to visit Japan quite a bit and actually see some of the props that were used and get some of the stories around it. As far as Chris and I, was this your first again, or I know it's your favorite? But
yeah. Well, I believe my dad is over there. I believe he showed me 1954 first, but for some reason, I don't know, 84 or 85 just sticks out in my head. I vividly remember watching it as a child, and I don't know, I really want to say that this was the first film I saw.
Yeah, and this is definitely the first one I saw as a child. It was around 4, and I remember just, being scared out of my wits about it, but was an instant fan after that point and just wanted more and started, going to the local library to start reading about this phenomenon that was known as Godzilla, and going to the rental stores, any video stores that were out there to acquire it, acquire as much as I could, as much knowledge as I could, and just be thoroughly entertained. So we're going to talk about pre-production to reception. Pre-producing this film, even though it might have even seemed like at times this film might have been rushed, and there was quite a bit of script rewrites and revisions and crew changes to be able to make this film happen. I know that, and Ed, of course, can back me up on some of the facts. Originally, Honda was asked to be the director of this film, but
at the time that this film went into production, Honda was already deep into working with his longtime colleague Akira Kurosawa. They had worked on Ron, they were, I believe, at this time working on Dreams. So even though Honda may or may not have been interested in reviving Godzilla, and to be honest, I don't think he was, he had, very good reason to decline the offer from Toho to work on this film because he was already working with Kurosawa. He was making things that he really wanted to make that he never had an opportunity to make on his own. So he was well satisfied with that, and I think he had already moved on past Godzilla. And in his opinion, he thought, well, Godzilla should be passed on to the next generation. And so he, asked his assistant director from films like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, which was Hashimoto. He suggested that he be assigned as the director for this project.
And in the end, they also had asked composer Ifukube to come back for that. And it's interesting, I know the comment that was always said, whether that's verified or not or confirmed, is that they've increased Godzilla's size to something like 80 meters, and I don't make music for 80-meter tall monsters.
That's like an apocryphal story. To be honest, talking to several people, they all say, well, it's a nice story, but it's probably not actually true.
Well, and obviously he didn't have a problem coming back to the series.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, because
He did come back.
at this point, yeah, and especially once Godzilla had finished with Godzilla in '75, he pretty much had come to the conclusion that's the end of his film scoring career. Although he did do a few minor things after that. But again, just much like Honda, he had thought, okay, it's time to move on and let a new generation handle these projects. So he deferred to Toho to ask him to get somebody else to do it. But certainly he was asked and pressured greatly to do this. Same as with Violante.
Right, yeah.
And then eventually, when Violante didn't turn out the way, when they did exactly what he asked them not to do, he said, okay, well, it's about time I just, if they're going to do that, I'll do it myself. And that's why he finally returned in '92.
And in a lot of ways, a lot of his cues were kind of being, in a lot of ways, revised and used anyways. But the music in this film went to Reijiro Kuruko, which I actually do appreciate the music in '85, and it has quite a darker tone to it, and I just feel like it really fits with that. Some of the music was remixed in different locations, I noticed, between the '84 and '85 film, in different locations. Was there additional music, I believe, in the
Yes.
'85 that was added by the
American
American?
version did have a few things like the Superman, the military march is one of them. There's a couple of small cues that are different from the Japanese.
Okay, and then we have the special effects by Teruyoshi Nakano, which quite a veteran of the Godzilla series anyways, and so bringing him back. Let's get to the cast actually, and I'm just going to bring up some slides that go through this. By the way, I found this poster in the dealer's room, was very happy to pick that up. The Prime Minister, Keiju Kobayashi, which I don't believe has any credits of any other Godzilla
Well,
films.
not Godzilla, but he has been in a couple of science fiction
Right.
version.
And I appreciated his acting style in this. He was took his job very seriously. I just feel like he really sold the role well. Ken Tanaka, I'm new to the Godzilla series as well, and also I think only Godzilla film, correct? Yeah. And the same with the actress who played Naoko Yasuko Sawaguchi.
No, she was in Violante.
Violante. Okay.
She plays the girl
Erica.
whose spirit is combined with
Okay.
Violante.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Daughter of Shirogane.
Okay.
She's a Toho Cinderella this year, Toho Cinderellas are newcomer actresses who the company will try and promote greatly in order to be like their next generation of actresses. And she just happened to be, for '84, one of their Cinderellas. So this is her first film, and I think it looks it because she's rather unnatural. But surprisingly, even though I don't think she did a particularly great job here, she went on to become one of Toho's most popular actresses through the '90s. She was particularly big in comedies. She was a good comic actress, and she also appeared in Yamato Take, the '90s film, the science fiction fantasy film.
And of course she is the sister, and the great coincidences, of course, of films where everyone seems to meet up somehow, even in the vast metropolis of Tokyo. We have the reporter that discovered the ship that was out to sea, discovers Ken, who is on the ship and still alive, and only by happenstance is that he's investigating what happened, meets Hayashida, which we'll get to later, and his assistant just so happens to be Ken's sister, who is Naoko, who we just saw. So Shin Takuma played Ken. Other credits to him as far as, yeah.
Science fiction film.
Not science fiction films. But interesting story about Hayashida, Yosuke Natsuke. Of course, we recognize him from Ghidra, the three-headed monster, and Dogora from the classic Toho films, and was going to be, I know, a guest last year for G-Fest via Skype, I believe, but I believe because of either scheduling or health reasons that he could not do that. But this role, I remember originally was going to go to Akihiko Hirata, who was Serizawa in the original Godzilla, and several other Godzilla films had played many roles, but specifically, of course, Serizawa, but unfortunately had succumbed to cancer the year, I believe, before production.
Yeah, just before they went in production.
So basically at the last minute, Natsuke was added to this cast. And we have a very brief, almost a cameo of Hiroshi Koizumi, who unfortunately also has passed away just recently, actually, and that's unfortunate, but he's left quite a legacy in the Godzilla films. You recognize him all the way back to Godzilla Raids Again, Mothra, and as late as Tokyo SOS. I believe that's his latest in the Godzilla series. So he plays the geologist Minami, who no speaking roles, but becomes pivotal in the death of Godzilla at the end of the film. Spoilers. Okay, and this is, again, I haven't gotten everyone from the cast, but these are the ones I've recognized from the classic G films. Konio Morai, if I've identified him correctly, yes. Takashi Shima from Godzilla vs. Gigan, and I believe that is, and he was also in GMK as a general of some sorts in that as well. So another from the classic, Yoshifumi Tajima. Tajima you'll recognize as the villain alongside Kenji Sahara from Godzilla vs. Mothra, but several of the classic Godzilla films in the Showa series, playing anywhere from generals to villains and everything in between. So quite the act. And if anyone wants to take in here and interrupt me, I'm perfectly fine with that. But the role of Godzilla was passed to Kenpachiro Satsuma, who played him until the '95 Destroya film. Satsuma's still with us. Maybe at some point, like Nakajima, maybe he'll have a reunion with the Godzilla suit. We don't know. I know Nakajima at one point had that reunion just maybe for a photo shoot, not for a film, but just to get him in the suit once again. But Satsuma, very strong physical condition for this, especially with the suit weighing something in the neighborhood of 220 pounds. This suit was bulked up quite a bit, and not only did we have the suit, but the Saibot Godzilla, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But as far as Satsuma was concerned, I know even as physically strong as he was to carry around the over 200-pound suit, he could only last about 10 minutes at a time in the suit. And they'd have to get him out and just cool off, relax, sit down, lay down, get himself back up and running, and drain the sweat out of the suit as well. So, yeah, quite the accomplishment. And I don't know how much weight he ended up losing by the end of production, but quite a bit. And so,
They, through any particular film, they would generally lose 15, 20 pounds.
yeah. And much like Nakajima.
He was not the original choice for a suit actor in this film.
Okay.
And actually, they built this suit for a much larger guy, with the idea that in this film they were going, because buildings and everything had gotten so huge in modern day Japan, that they thought, well, Godzilla at 15 meters is going to look pretty puny and it just won't look very impressive. So they thought that they needed to up the scale, and they made Godzilla's height 80 meters. And to go along with that, the increase in Godzilla's physical size, they tried to make the suit even bigger than they normally did. And so they got this particularly tall actor whose name has never really been publicized. But once he kind of saw what it was all about and he saw the suit, he just kind of backed out. He's like, I'm not going to do this. And so at the last moment, they actually wound up going back to Satsuma, who had been, he had done Hydra and Gigan back in the 70s.
Right.
So Nakano specifically was very familiar with him, and so they brought him in to do the job.
Right, and
In fact,
yeah,
here's
there's the suit.
here's a
right
picture of the suit that I was fortunate enough to go to the studio in January of '85 when this is, these guys talk about this being their first film. Well, this was my first film to see in Japan, and so I was lucky enough at the time. A friend of mine also got us to get into the studio and got to see the suit and some of these miniatures that you see here that they had used in the filming.
There's the Russian sub. That Godzilla's
submarine.
Yeah, some here
And
is.
that's the Russian freighter.
Yeah, and Ed,
With
for
some young guy there, I don't know.
Yeah.
30 years ago.
And Ed holding the Super X. The Super X to give
It
you
is
an idea.
heavy. That's made out of wood and fiberglass.
Oh, goodness. And back up to
Okay,
okay.
that's this guy is Hiroshi Takeuchi, who's a famous author for science fiction books, and he's just standing there with some of the miniature buildings from the film.
Okay. And then the Cybot.
There you go, Mr. Saibot. This picture I actually took in '85. I couldn't find the one that I had from '84, or actually I couldn't say '95. It was still in one piece and out on display at a big exhibition in Tokyo that they put on for Destroyer. But this thing was still functional, and like every 5 minutes it would go through some cycle where it would, it would rear back and roar and kind of turn the head, and the mouth would open and close, and the eyes would open and close.
And it's important to realize that this is about 7-8 years before we had the robotics of Stan Winston Studios to do Jurassic Park, which did partial CG and partial animatronic T-Rexes and other dinosaurs that were in that film. But this thing was just enormous and ended up being quite a promotional tool for Toho.
Yeah, well, shall we get into talking about this thing?
About the
Saibot?
the Cybot, yes,
Yeah.
let's talk about it. Yeah.
Well, one thing that's always kind of amazed me is that when they made this thing, which is about 20 feet tall, and 3 meters, they, I don't know, originally planned to do all the special effects with this thing. And they, had this huge press conference where they unveiled this, and they put it on display and showed what it can do, and it really couldn't do much. They couldn't move the legs at all. The arms, if they did move, they were kind of like this, like really jittery and jerky, and it didn't have any smooth movement at all. So I think they finally understood after the press conference that this isn't really going to work if we're going to try and use a robot in its entirety for the film. So they wisely decided, okay, we'll do the supplement with Soup Nation as well, which is a much better idea, because honestly, this thing, yes, it's wonderful as far as its size, and it was a fantastic publicity gimmick for Toho, because they took this all over, they toured it all over the country, but it didn't move smoothly at all, and even when you see it on film, the movement is not always the best, but it doesn't look anything like the costume. So
Yeah, there's quite a bit of difference as you can tell when you're seeing the suit versus the Cybot.
One really funny story about this is this thing was mainly run by hydraulics, so pressurized tubes with water in them. And when they had it out on display in Osaka, a friend of mine actually happened to be there at the time, and he told me the story. Is that one of the lines ruptured inside the Cybot, and so Godzilla, who usually is shooting out some white hot flame, he started shooting water out of his mouth. Because the hydraulics were just, it's pressurized, so it's just really shooting out there. So Godzilla was shooting water out of his mouth.
But what ended up being actually on film is only close-ups, but where a lot of the detail in the movements is in like lips curling, things like that, the facial expressions.
Yeah, that it could perform, and it's unfortunate. I think they were onto the right idea, but making it so huge, I think, was the big mistake, because the larger you make something like this, the harder it is to control and get a smooth movement, and that's where Kawakita, saw the wisdom of what they tried to do with this, and in Violante, he made one that's more, about the size of the suit. And at that size, you can control it by hand, and you can really get a lot of sophisticated movement in it.
See both versions of it. Any particular details that really stand out that has either been omitted or added in either version that
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is the Cold War controversy part, with the ship that the guy is trying to disarm it, but in the Japanese version, he's trying to stop the missile from being shot, but in the American version, they're like, they purposely make it seem like he's like, yep, we're gonna hit the missile, there we go, and then he dies, it's
Right.
like, it's kinda like, oh, nice.
heroically trying to stop the countdown
Yes.
in the Japanese version and dying in the process.
Yeah.
But in our American release, you see that finger push the button at the last,
Make him like the bad guy.
yeah, with the dying breath. Yeah, that was not in the original version. And some of the other omissions of the Cold War controversy. There was an addition of the committee meeting with the Japanese leaders. Considering what the Russian and American ambassadors were trying to tell them, trying to pressure them into using nuclear weapons on their own soil, and of permitting this to happen. And so, meeting about that, being able to try to stay diplomatically good with their neighbors, but at the same time understanding that we have to stand firm with our policies against nuclear weapons. And again, this is our homeland, so would you have done that same? Would you have the same reaction if Godzilla had visited your homeland? Would you allow me to come to your homeland and start dropping nuclear bombs on the giant monster that's invading it? So, so there was that kind of going on. Any more about the Cold War?
Well, specifically the part about the way they changed the story with the Russian sailor trying to stop the bomb from going off, from being launched. That really kind of goes back to one of the editors for New World, who released this film here. They kind of took that as an opportunity to put a little bit of politics into the film. Understand that this is 1984 that they were working on this. This is the pretty much still the height of the Cold War era, Reagan era. And it was a way to kind of like do a little bit of Russian bashing, which was very much in vogue at that time. And so they kind of actively edited the film to make it look a little bit more us against them. Russians are the bad guys. They can't do anything anything nice. How could we as Americans think that that's possible? And that's
and in the end,
unfortunately, that's why scenes like that got put into this.
And in the end, the Americans actually still end up in a sense, save the day by being able to shoot down the missile with our advanced technology, right? So, but in the end, of course, reawakening Godzilla, so so damage continues to be done. We can't get everything right. We just got to get this problem taken care of. Anything else about the differences between the two versions?
Raymond Burr, of course, was also one of the biggest ones too. I definitely prefer him in this one. Like in the original 1954 film, Raymond Burr was in the 1956 American version, and to me, I feel like he just kind of was just there. He didn't really do a lot in that one. He was just kind of narrating what was going on. But in this one, his involvement was way more physical. He was telling the military, like, you guys got to change up your strategy plans. Your tanks and your planes are just toys to him. You're going to antagonize them. You got to figure something else out. And I love in the American version, one of the lieutenants or generals, like the wisecracking comedy relief guy, he was just like saying all these funny things, and every time he says something, the camera will just pan to Raymond Burr, and he'll just look and just be like, I just love that, man. So I definitely like Raymond Burr's performance in this one. It was also about the Steve Martin name. They had to change it to just Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mr. Martin, because the actual Steve Martin character was more popular, or the actor was more popular.
Yeah, it's like, he's not Steve Martin, he's not cracking jokes.
Yeah, exactly.
But interestingly enough, Raymond Burr coming back to this role took it very seriously. In a lot of ways, when New World approached him to shoot some of these scenes, they were thinking, well, he's going to say no. I mean, he's Perry Mason. He's such a legendary actor. He's not going to agree to this, and they were, to their surprise, he agreed, and for whatever value that they gave him, he probably would have done it for nothing, because he really appreciated the character, and being in the 56 King of the Monsters version, he took that role very seriously, worked to make the role to sell, and when going into this, in a lot of ways, the scripting for the American additional footage at the Pentagon was more comedic and lighthearted in nature. When they realized the tone that he wanted to bring to it, they started relegating a lot of the comedic aspects to that Secretary General, whatever he was, the commander. And again, he's somewhat forgettable, but and that's what ended up happening. So, but you're right about it. He's taken the role very seriously, and he matches the tone of the Japanese footage.
Something, because it's so muddy and grainy, and the film is not that. The original film is not that way. It's very clear and sharp in its photography. So that's one of the unfortunate changes, and I don't know if it's even really called a change, but I don't know why it got released in that manner, but the American prints are pretty much substandard in terms of image quality.
Now, even in the Laserdisc edition, it's still in the 4:3 pan and scan mode, so you're not even getting. Was it shot in scope? No, it was not. Okay.
This is standard.
Standard. Okay. About either versions, or did you dislike anything at all?
That's hard. That's really hard to figure out what I disliked. I mean, like in the American version, it's just the comedy routine with some of the generals there. Like, I don't know, I just felt like they weren't taking it seriously, especially compared to what Raymond Burr was doing. But sometimes the Cybot would just look odd after shot, like they'd show the suit and then they'd show the Cybot, and it wouldn't really blend well. But honestly, everything else about the film I love. The dark tone, how it's bringing Godzilla back to the roots, and to me, this is what Godzilla is. Like, I love the Showa series with the campiness that it is, but the 1954 film is that, for me, the metaphor of what Godzilla is with the nuclear bomb and all that, and this Godzilla just brought it right back to what it's supposed, to me at least, what Godzilla is supposed to be. Yeah, the suit, I love the suit. It's my favorite suit. It's my favorite roar. The roar is just so powerful and just so terrifying. You play that on like a big sound system. It's just it's crazy. Yeah, and the music, I definitely did like the music, especially the intro. Like the American, I think the American version and the Japanese have basically the same intro somewhat.
Yeah.
Some differences.
Well, as far as like the title sequence, you mean, or you're talking about just
like the music, the opening.
The music, the opening music is the same.
Yeah.
Title sequence was actually redone
A little bit different, yeah. But the music, the opening was just really good. I actually have the, I got the whole Perfect Soundtrack 50th Anniversary disc set, and there was like 6 boxes of those, and I was really happy that I finally had like a really good release of the soundtrack for this movie, and I love listening to it. So, yeah, really good movie.
And as far as the what I liked about the American release, I'll actually kind of talk about that is with Raymond Burr's dialogue at the end, there's a little narration as to when Godzilla has jumped into Mount Mihara, and he's got that haunting speech at the end. I think it was, which was written by Burr, as I understand. It was actually voiced and written by him, so that was actually him putting. And so, drawing out the emotion of going back to the '54 film, of how we felt about the death of Godzilla at that point. That you see him as somewhat of an innocent creature. That he is what he is. He's territorial, he's destructive, but at the same time, in a lot of ways, this is kind of humanity's payback for what we've done. So in so many ways, he's like you said, he's a hurricane, a tornado, all of these things. So again, a force of nature that you can't do anything about, but get out of his way. So when it comes down to that, there were serious aspects of it that were taken into consideration in the American release. Again, just kind of waiting on what's going to happen in the future as far as a format that might be available for us.
That roar when he falls in, just haunting to me. I don't know. It's like we hear Godzilla like screaming in terror or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's one of
that last little cry.
It's just like, ugh, I get goosebumps.
Yeah. We go ahead and open up to Q&A.
Is there a reason why there's not a legitimate release of this?
As far as the rights are concerned, the rights seem to be in such just a terrible limbo. New World, I'm not sure what year New World actually went out of business, but...
Closer to your favorite or your least favorite out of all of them?
I'd say closer to favorite.
Number one.
Number one, that's awesome.
Myself, I'd say it's about as even. What bothers me about this film more than anything is that by changing the scale, making the miniatures so much smaller, I don't think that they really understood how to film those miniatures to make them look as good as all the miniatures in previous films did. So that's the one big weakness that I see in this film. Plus, Yasuko Sawauchi's character, which really, she's pretty bad.
Actually, in the back first, so you're like... Yep.
Yeah. As far as you know, was Raymond Burr approached to do more films, subsequent films? No. Would he have done them if he was still? Probably. If he was asked?
Well, he certainly signed on to this one enthusiastically, so I would expect that if they had done so, then probably he would have been up for it. But all the '90s films during the '90s, none of them got any kind of release here.
Yeah, that's right.
Total didn't really pursue getting them released here, and nobody went after them to get them released.
What were your personal favorite scenes from the movie? Like, your favorite scene in the film?
I'd say Ed likes to use the term money shot, and it's that burning down of the bridge with the fire, with all the military just going kaput at that point.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
The money shot.
Yeah, that is.
That's the money shot.
Actually, I like this particular scene with the Super X battle.
Back and forth.
Using the environment to your advantage to try and attack the monster. I kind of like that idea, and that's why I had always enjoyed a lot of Kawakita's film, because he always tried to use the environment, incorporate that into the battling technique.
And it's a brutal battle, and now they're on the defensive at this point. Yeah, they don't have. He's learned from his mistake already.
All right, my question is about the end of the movie. I know personally I'm 33 years old and I still cannot make it through the end of that movie without shedding a tear. It's such an odd turn from the other movies that they went for this super emotional, just like gut-wrenching ending, and I was wondering, I've never heard anybody elaborate on what was the reason for making us feel completely and totally sorry for him. And
Why did you feel sorry for him?
yeah, I mean, like, what was the reasoning for them going for the gut-wrenching at the end there?
But shouldn't we be celebrating, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I guess, again, going back to the 54 film, Yamane had already understood that this is a creature that needs to be studied, and in a lot of ways, he's a victim of circumstance. We created him, and so in so many ways, can we blame him for reacting in this sort of way? And so I guess that's where the emotional tie comes from that. But yes, you're not wrong. Shouldn't we be saying, we got rid of him? Everyone, start applauding, and no one's applauding, right? And even Natsuke's character, who's basically arranging everything to make this happen, at one point is saying, well, this is really not going to defeat him. He's going to come back. And much like Yamane said, if we continue to use nuclear weapons, it will create a new Godzilla, and a year later they did, and Godzilla raids again. Actually, almost less than a year, 6 months later after the release, and that's my next panel actually in a few minutes in Ballroom 1. So, Baron.
One scene that gets overlooked, and I think that you may have maybe elaborated on that just a little bit ago, I'm not sure, but it showed up on the screen, is that scene in the city when the burning helicopter falls down and it completely lights up that highway. I'm assuming there's civilians in those cars, so I mean that. A lot of people don't realize that. That's actually a little bit of a dark scene. And
everyone had a full tank of gas, and the road was just covered in gunpowder. I mean, at a certain point, Godzilla says, "Whoa! Didn't know that was going to happen."
Is there any truth to the story that Raymond Burr wrote this closing speech for the American version?
As I understand it, there is truth. I have actually David Callett's book, and he claims that it was actually written by Burr. Over here, young man.
I was wondering throughout most of the Godzilla movies, with everything being destroyed, buildings, houses, cars, mountains even sometimes, I was wondering if anybody would have like insurance, when insurance agencies cover your Godzilla.
Monster insurance. Thanks for being on the panel. And
All right, guys.